He walked into the shelter expecting to adopt a tough, aggressive German shepherd, one everyone warned him about. The staff said, "Be careful. This one doesn't trust anyone." But what happened after he took that dog home? No one could have predicted. This story will show you how one moment can change everything. The shelter hallway smelled like antiseptic and stress. Old tile floors echoed with distant barks, metal clinks, and the low hum of fluorescent lights. As Ethan Ross followed the shelter manager past rows of kennels, he could feel the tension thickening with every step. Not from him, but from the dog he was about to meet. They'd warned him. "This one's different," the manager, Marcus, had said. "He's not like the others. Aggressive. Doesn't let anyone near him. We've had 3 volunteers quit after trying." That didn't shake Ethan. He had seen aggression before. As a former Marine canine handler, he'd worked with some of the toughest dogs in combat zones. But he wasn't looking for a war dog this time. He was just lonely. Since leaving the service, the silence of civilian life felt louder than the explosions he used to hear. He thought maybe adopting a dog would help. "Why him?" Marcus asked as they stopped in front of Kennel 22. Ethan peered through the bars. Inside, a large male German shepherd, about 5 years old, stood stiffly at the back of the kennel. His coat was thick but uneven. One ear drooped slightly. His amber eyes locked onto Ethan's like a challenge. "I read his file," Ethan said. "No one else wants him." "That's for a reason," Marcus said. "He lunged at our vet, bit a staff member, growls if you get too close." "I can handle it," Ethan replied calmly. "Just open the door." Marcus hesitated. "You sure?" Ethan nodded. The door creaked as it swung open slowly. Ethan didn't enter right away. He crouched down just outside, keeping his posture low and neutral. He didn't speak, didn't extend a hand. The dog growled, a deep, throaty warning. But he didn't charge. Ethan waited. 1 minute, then 2. The dog finally shifted his stance, ears twitching. His body was rigid, but he wasn't advancing. Ethan took that as permission. He took 1 slow step inside. Still no movement from the dog. "I'm not here to fight you," Ethan said softly. "I'm just here." The dog blinked. "Name's Thor," Marcus said behind him. "Though he doesn't answer to it. We're not even sure he knows his name anymore." Ethan stayed still. After 10 minutes, he finally backed out. "I'll take him," he said. Marcus looked stunned. "You haven't even touched him." "I don't need to, not yet." That night, Ethan filled out the paperwork. The adoption was approved under special conditions. Experienced handler, no children in the home, full liability waiver. When the staff loaded Thor into Ethan's truck crate, the dog didn't fight. He didn't relax either. He simply stared straight ahead, still as stone. On the ride home, Ethan didn't play music. He didn't talk. He just drove in silence, while Thor sat in the crate, quiet, unreadable. Ethan's home was in the hills outside of town. Simple, 1 story, fenced yard, no clutter, just space. When they arrived, Ethan didn't open the crate immediately. He let Thor sniff the air through the door, let the silence do the talking. Finally, he unlatched it. Thor stepped out slowly. His head was low, body stiff, but he didn't growl. He looked around, took 2 steps toward the door. Ethan opened it. No leash, no commands. He simply let the dog walk inside on his own. And Thor did. He walked past Ethan, straight into the living room, and laid down. His body still coiled like a spring, but not hostile. That's when Ethan noticed something strange. The growling had stopped. But that was just the first night. What Ethan would discover over the next few days would reveal a completely different truth about Thor's past, and why this aggressive dog didn't need discipline. He needed something else entirely. Thor didn't make a sound for the first 2 days. No barking, no growling, not even a whimper, just the click of his nails on hardwood floors and the occasional shuffle of his massive frame shifting from one resting spot to another. Ethan wasn't sure if that was a good sign or something worse. He gave the dog space. Ethan left the back door open during the day so Thor could come and go into the fenced yard. He kept food and water available at all times. He didn't try to pet him, didn't call his name, just existed in the same space, quiet, unthreatening, present. At night, Thor didn't sleep. He paced. Ethan could hear his heavy steps through the walls, circling the house, occasionally stopping near Ethan's bedroom door, then moving on, never laying down, never relaxing. It reminded Ethan of something, a soldier on watch. On the third morning, Ethan was sitting on the porch sipping black coffee, wrapped in a hoodie against the early chill. The sun had barely crested the treetops when he heard the click-click of paws on the wooden deck. Thor appeared beside him. No eye contact, no noise. He sat, not close, not touching, but near enough to make Ethan freeze mid-sip. The shepherd's ears twitched at a distant bird call. His eyes scanned the trees. His body was still tight, but he stayed. Ethan didn't speak, just nodded slightly, acknowledging the choice Thor had made. He showed up again the next morning, and the one after that, always just sitting, always silent. By the end of the week, something subtle had changed. Thor no longer flinched when Ethan moved around the kitchen. He stopped pacing at night. He began sleeping, really sleeping, curled up near the front door. But what struck Ethan most happened on a rainy afternoon. The sky had cracked open with thunder, and Thor had disappeared into the hallway. Curious, Ethan followed the sound of light scratching and found him curled up in the laundry room, shaking. A dog that big, that powerful, trembling like a child. Ethan didn't approach. He simply sat down across the room and waited. "I get it," he said quietly. Thunder cracked again, and Thor's eyes flicked toward him. That's when Ethan saw the scar. Faint but unmistakable. A long, jagged line just under Thor's rib cage, mostly hidden by fur. Someone had hurt him. Not disciplined. Not trained. Hurt. The next day, Ethan contacted the shelter for Thor's full intake records. What he got made his blood run cold. Thor hadn't come from a surrender. He'd been rescued from a property where 3 other dogs were found, 2 dead, 1 barely alive. The report said Thor was found chained in a yard, without food, covered in wounds. The label, aggressive, hadn't come from behavior. It had come from how he looked when they pulled him out. Muzzle covered in blood. Not his own. That night, Ethan sat beside Thor on the porch again. He looked over at the dog, who now lay calmly beside him, eyes half closed, and said, "You weren't the threat, were you?" Thor opened one eye. For the first time, Ethan reached out, very slowly, and gently rested his hand on Thor's shoulder. No reaction, just a slow breath from the dog's chest. A sigh, not of fear, but of relief. What Ethan believed about Thor was starting to fall apart. This wasn't a dangerous dog. This was a survivor, one who had been judged by his size, his silence, and someone else's cruelty. But the biggest test of trust? It was coming. Because the very next day, Thor would do something that would change Ethan's life forever. The morning started like any other. Ethan fed Thor, opened the back door, and sat at the small table near the window with his coffee. Thor had already established a quiet rhythm, eating slowly, walking a few laps around the yard, then resting on the porch like a sentry. But that day, something was different. Ethan noticed it immediately. Thor didn't touch his food. He didn't leave the porch. Instead, he stood by the open door, head low, eyes locked onto something across the tree line beyond the fence. Ethan followed his gaze. There, parked just off the road, was an old, faded blue pickup truck. The engine was off. No movement. Just sitting there. Ethan stepped outside. Thor didn't bark, didn't growl, but his body language changed. Shoulders squared, tail stiff, ears pinned back. His entire frame was alert, focused. Ethan narrowed his eyes. The truck didn't move. After a minute, it slowly rolled forward and disappeared down the dirt road. Later that afternoon, Ethan made a call to the shelter manager. "You guys keep any record of who Thor was seized from?" he asked. Marcus hesitated on the other end. "It was sealed. Court case involving animal cruelty." "Why?" "Someone just sat outside my property," Ethan said. "No plates. Just watching." Marcus's voice lowered. "It might be nothing, but I wouldn't take chances." Neither would Ethan. That night, he moved Thor's bed to the foot of his own. He checked the locks twice, loaded the old revolver he kept tucked under the dresser. Thor didn't sleep much. Neither did Ethan. The next day brought the moment that would change everything. Ethan was in the garage, fixing a loose panel on the fence post, when he heard Thor bark. Not just bark, explode. It was the first time Ethan had ever heard him make a sound. He dropped his tools and ran, through the back door, across the kitchen, into the yard. What he saw stopped him cold. The same blue truck, this time parked in front of the gate. A man was standing at the fence, middle-aged, in a stained coat, shouting toward the house. "I know that dog's in there," he yelled. "You have my damn dog." Thor stood between the man and the house, teeth bared, shoulders rigid. His bark was thunderous, non-stop, but he wasn't lunging. He was holding the line. Ethan stepped up beside him. "You need to leave." The man didn't budge. "That's my dog. You think the shelter told you the truth? That dog's mine. He's trained to protect. I raised him for it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You raised him to survive." The man pointed. "You don't know what he is." "I know exactly what he is," Ethan said. "And I know what you did." The man looked at Thor, who had not moved an inch, then back at Ethan, and for the first time, the man flinched. "You better watch your back," he muttered, then turned, climbed into the truck, and peeled off in a cloud of dust. After the truck was gone, Thor turned his head slowly, looking at Ethan. The growl stopped, the tension drained, and he walked over and pressed his body softly into Ethan's leg. It wasn't panic. It was something else. A question. Am I safe now? Ethan knelt down, wrapped an arm around the dog's broad shoulders, and whispered, "You're never going back. You're home." That was the moment it all changed, because Thor didn't just protect Ethan's home, he protected his own. From that day forward, the fear began to fade. But Ethan knew, trust like this doesn't happen by chance. It's earned. And now, it had to be protected because the man who showed up wasn't finished yet. It had been 4 days since the man came to the gate. Ethan had filed a police report. There wasn't much they could do, no license plate, no official custody dispute. But they logged the complaint, advised him to keep an eye out and stay cautious. Ethan was already doing both. He'd changed Thor's walk schedule, installed motion lights, even mounted a trail cam near the road. But what changed most was Thor. Since the confrontation, something in the dog had shifted. He no longer hovered near the walls. He followed Ethan through the house with soft, measured steps, slept with his head near the door, watched every movement outside with quiet purpose. But his eyes weren't wide with panic anymore. They were focused, present. Ethan could feel it. Thor didn't see himself as a rescued dog anymore. He saw himself as a protector. Late Thursday night, the knock came. Not loud, just slow, calm, calculated. Ethan paused mid-step in the hallway, the sound stopping him cold. Thor was already at the door, body rigid, tail stiff, not wagging. Ethan peeked through the peephole. No one. He opened the door anyway. There, on the porch, sat an envelope. No markings, no postage, just his name, Ethan, scrawled across the front in uneven handwriting. He picked it up, opened it slowly, and unfolded a single sheet of paper. "He's my dog. I want him back. You don't know what he's capable of." That was it. No name, no threat, just a warning. But Ethan didn't take it lightly. Neither did Thor, who didn't leave the front of the house all night. The next morning, Ethan went into town, not to run errands, to talk to someone who might finally help him end this. He drove to the county records office. After a few phone calls and a bit of paperwork, he got a name from the original cruelty case. Brian Slater, the same man who had shown up at the gate. Multiple prior offenses, 2 counts of animal neglect, 1 dismissed cruelty charge, no criminal conviction, but a known name among local shelters. Ethan sat in his truck, staring at the report, then looked at Thor, who sat calmly in the back seat. "You were never safe with him." Thor blinked. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to act. That night, Ethan made a decision. He moved Thor's bed into the bedroom, right beside his own. He reinforced the fence, locked the gates, and kept his phone close. He wasn't waiting for the next knock. He was preparing for it. At 2:43 a.m., Thor growled, low, deep, the kind of sound that comes from instinct, not training. Ethan jolted awake, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. Thor was already by the back window, nose to the glass. Ethan peeked out and saw it, a shadow moving along the edge of the property. Someone was out there. He slipped on his boots, leashed Thor, and opened the side door. They moved silently through the yard, down the gravel path to the outer fence. No one was visible at first, but then, just beyond the brush, a man stepped into the open. Brian. He wasn't holding anything, but his eyes were locked on Thor. "That dog is mine," he hissed. Ethan tightened his grip on the leash. "No," he said. "He was never yours. You had him, but you broke him." Brian took a step forward. "He remembers me." "He does," Ethan said, "and he's choosing not to go near you." Thor stood beside Ethan, unmoving, not barking, not growling, just standing tall, eyes forward, ears high. Brian waited for something, maybe a reaction, maybe an order, but Thor didn't move. He didn't lunge. He didn't cower. He simply stood his ground. That was his answer. Brian backed up and disappeared into the dark. That night, for the first time since Thor came home, he slept belly up, fully exposed, relaxed, trusting. Ethan knew exactly what that meant, but the fight wasn't over, because what neither of them knew yet was that Brian had filed a legal ownership claim, and they had 72 hours before the court would decide if Thor stayed or went back. Ethan stared at the letter on the table like it might catch fire. Pet ownership dispute, hearing scheduled in 72 hours, signed and stamped by the county clerk. Thor lay nearby, head resting calmly on his front paws. His eyes followed Ethan's every move, not with fear, but quiet loyalty. He had no idea what was at stake, but Ethan did. The claim Brian had filed wasn't based on new ownership. It was based on past possession, an old vet bill from years ago, a faded photo of a younger Thor chained in a dirt lot. Brian had claimed unlawful shelter seizure and demanded the dog be returned to him immediately. The court couldn't ignore it. Ethan had 72 hours to prove that Thor didn't belong with the man who used to own him. He called Marcus, the shelter manager. "They're allowing it to move forward?" Marcus asked, shocked. "They're required to," Ethan said. "There's paperwork. It's technical, but it's enough to open a hearing." "You need evidence," Marcus said. "Behavioral reports, vet statements, photos, anything that shows Thor has been abused and has recovered under your care." "I've got most of it," Ethan said, "but it won't be enough without a behavioral expert." Marcus paused. "I might know someone." The next morning, a woman named Dr. Lena Graves arrived at Ethan's home. Early 40s, tall, composed, dressed in a tan utility jacket with a notepad tucked under her arm. She'd worked with court cases involving abused animals for years. "I'll need to observe him," she said. "In natural interaction. No commands. Just you. Him. Real life." Ethan nodded and opened the door. Thor was lying on the living room rug. As soon as he saw her, he stood. Not alarmed, just cautious. Lena didn't approach. She sat on the floor a few feet away. "Does he allow touch?" she asked quietly. Ethan knelt beside Thor and ran a hand slowly along his back. Thor leaned into it. Lena scribbled something. Then she watched as Ethan tossed Thor his toy, a simple knotted rope, and the dog trotted toward it with a calm gait. "He shows no signs of aggression," she said. "But more importantly, he shows restraint, stability, attachment." She lowered her voice. "That doesn't come from training. That comes from healing." That night, Ethan printed photos. He laid them out on the kitchen table the day Thor came home, thin, tense, staring through bars. A week later, resting on the porch, distant eyes. Then again, lying next to Ethan's boots, the moment he stood between Ethan and Brian at the gate. And finally, sleeping belly up at the foot of Ethan's bed. He labeled each one with the date, behavior, and change observed. He was building a case not just of ownership, but of transformation. The next morning, Lena sent him her official report. The animal identified as Thor exhibits clear trauma recovery under current care. His behavior reflects attachment, emotional safety, and a consistent environment. Relocation may result in regression and significant psychological harm. Ethan folded the report and placed it atop the folder. Time was almost up. That night, he and Thor sat on the porch, just as the sun slipped beneath the horizon. Ethan looked down at him. "You ready?" Thor lifted his head, then gently rested it on Ethan's knee. Ethan smiled faintly. "I didn't rescue you, did I?" Thor closed his eyes. "You rescued me." The courthouse was waiting. One man wanted his dog back. The other was fighting to protect his family. What happened inside that courtroom would change both of their lives forever. The courthouse was quiet. The hearing was closed to the public. Just a clerk, a judge, 2 attorneys, and 2 men who couldn't have been more different. Brian Slater, sitting stiffly in a faded blazer and scuffed boots, looked impatient. His lawyer, a local general attorney, leafed through a slim file. Across the aisle sat Ethan, calm but focused. His file was thick, filled with documentation, statements, and photos. Beside him, Dr. Lena Graves reviewed her behavioral report one last time, and lying quietly at Ethan's feet, as if this were just another morning on the porch, was Thor. He wore no leash, no muzzle, just a soft black collar with his name engraved. He lay still, head resting over Ethan's boot, his eyes half closed. The judge entered and called the hearing to order. Brian's attorney spoke first. "My client, Mr. Slater, originally owned this dog. As shown in veterinary records dated nearly 4 years ago, the animal went missing, and when later recovered by local animal control, he was mistakenly adopted out without my client's knowledge or consent." He paused, then added, "Mr. Slater simply wants his dog returned." The judge looked unimpressed. "Mr. Slater, how long was this animal missing before you attempted to reclaim him?" Brian cleared his throat. I didn't know where he'd gone. Didn't have time to file anything. I assumed he was gone for good." "How did you locate him?" Brian hesitated. "I saw him. Someone said he'd seen a dog like mine out near the old base. I tracked him down." Ethan remained quiet. Now it was his turn. Ethan stood, opened the folder, and handed the judge the first photo. Thor in the kennel, emaciated and distant. "This is how he looked when I met him," Ethan said. He slid forward another photo, Thor sleeping near Ethan's bed. "This is him 3 weeks later." He continued laying down photos, Thor relaxing in the sun, playing with a rope toy, leaning into Ethan's touch. Then he passed over Dr. Lena Graves's report. "She's a certified behaviorist. Her evaluation confirms Thor has recovered from trauma under my care. Returning him to his former environment may cause irreversible regression." The judge flipped through the documents in silence. Finally, Lena spoke. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "this is not a matter of ownership. It's a matter of welfare. This dog was not just lost. He was found chained, underfed, and behaviorally damaged. The evidence is overwhelming." Brian's attorney rose. "Objection. That's speculative." The judge cut him off. "It's professional testimony, and I'll allow it." Then the judge did something unexpected. He looked at Brian. "Mr. Slater, do you want the dog back because you care for him, or because you believe he still obeys you?" Brian didn't answer. So the judge looked down at Thor. He spoke directly to Ethan. "Can you approach?" Ethan stood and walked slowly to the center of the room, Thor at his side, moving calmly. No leash, no fear. "Stay," Ethan whispered. Thor sat and remained still. The judge leaned forward. "What happens if Mr. Slater tries to take him now?" Ethan looked at Thor. "Try it," he said quietly. Brian stood. He took 1 step forward. Thor didn't bark, didn't growl, but his body stiffened instantly. Not in panic, in readiness. He planted his paws, lifted his head, and locked eyes with Brian. Brian stopped mid-step and sat back down. The judge exhaled slowly. "I've seen enough." 10 minutes later, the decision was written and read aloud. This court recognizes that the dog known as Thor is best served remaining under the care of Mr. Ethan Ross. The motion to reclaim ownership is denied. The adoption is confirmed as legal and permanent. Brian stormed out without a word. Outside, Ethan knelt beside Thor. "You did it," he whispered. Thor leaned in, pressing his forehead to Ethan's chest. Not a soldier, not a survivor, just a dog, finally home. But what Ethan didn't know yet was that Thor had one last surprise in store for him. A secret that would change everything they thought they knew about how their journey began. A week had passed since the courtroom ruling. The quiet around Ethan's home had never felt more peaceful. The threat was gone. The fight was over. But somehow, something still lingered in Thor's eyes. A question, maybe, or a truth not yet spoken. Thor had become part of Ethan's every moment. He followed without command, waited without being asked. He no longer paced at night. He no longer watched the windows. He no longer slept in silence. He dreamed. Sometimes he ran in his sleep. Sometimes he barked softly. But always, he curled into Ethan's side in the morning like he belonged there. And he did. But Ethan had a feeling. This story wasn't finished. It happened on a calm Thursday morning. Ethan had taken Thor into town for a walk around the lake. Thor was relaxed, tail low but loose, breathing in the fresh air. People noticed him now, not with fear, but admiration. "Beautiful dog," one older man said as they passed. "Got the eyes of a soldier." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, he's been through it." He turned toward the parking lot to head home, when Thor suddenly froze. His body tensed, not in fear, but in alertness. He stared across the lot toward a woman standing next to a small car, fumbling with her keys. Ethan followed his gaze. The woman looked up and locked eyes with Thor. Her face changed instantly. Tears welled in her eyes. Her hand went to her mouth. Ethan stepped forward cautiously. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She nodded slowly, then whispered something that hit Ethan like a lightning bolt. His name's not Thor. Her name was Angela Carter, a former volunteer with a rescue organization 2 towns over. 4 years ago, she and her team had helped pull 3 abused dogs from a property under emergency order. Only one disappeared before transport, a large male German Shepherd. She showed Ethan a photo on her phone. It was Thor. Same face, same eyes, just younger, thinner, and chained to a tree. "I cried for weeks when he vanished," she said. "We thought maybe the owner sold him, or worse." Ethan's throat tightened. Angela knelt down slowly. "His name was Chance," she said gently. "That's what we named him when we pulled him out, because we swore we'd give him one." Thor didn't flinch. He looked at her, then stepped forward and licked her hand. A soft, slow gesture. Forgiveness. Recognition. But then, he turned back to Ethan and sat beside him. Angela smiled, eyes still glistening. "He's telling you. You're his chance now." That night, Ethan sat on the porch, Thor beside him, both of them watching the stars come out one by one. "I don't care what name you came with," he said softly. "You'll always be Thor to me." The dog let out a low, relaxed sigh and rested his head on Ethan's lap. But the name Chance stayed with him, because maybe he wasn't just given a second chance. Maybe he was the second chance. For both of them. Some dogs aren't born aggressive. They're made afraid. But with patience, respect, and love, they don't just heal. They become healers themselves. If this story moved you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes every animal deserves a second chance. You never know who might need to hear it.